Welcome back, folks, and today we will continue talking about articles. We still have a lot of things to learn, but of course the basics you acquired last week would be a good foundation for what we're going to learn today. So let's dive in. Last week we talked about different sorts of nouns: proper nouns, common nouns, countable, uncountable, singular and plural. But whatever your choice is, it will come down to the choice between general and specific. So today we'll talk a little bit more about the criteria we can use to see the difference between a general noun and a specific noun, because general nouns usually require article the, and specific nouns usually requires article the, and general nouns either require a or some or no article. Right? So that's why it's an important difference. So let's take a particular example. For example, we would talk about fear, right? So you can cite just kind of a fear, right? So a fear you have. It's quite general. We just talk about some kind of fear. We don't know what a fear of what, right? You can say an awful fear. And many students here would say, that's quite specific, not just any fear, awful fear, Artyom, that's specific. Well, it's still not specific enough, because when we talk about a specific noun, it's the unique noun, this one particular thing. And an awful fear can be of different sorts. An awful fear of darkness or an awful fear of spiders. Both are possible, right? So that's why it's not specific enough. It's still quite general. Well, you might say, I have an awful fear. It's specifically my awful fear, but again, it can be your specifically awful fear of spiders or of darkness or of anything. So it's still just one of these fears you have, and it's not clear which one we're talking about. So it's still general. So then the question is, when can I see that it's specific? So for example, she couldn't shake the fear that she would be alone forever. You cannot think of many fears that she should be alone forever. It's quite a unique, specific fear. When I just say an awful fear of spiders or darkness or whatever, see, there are many options, it's quite general. But when they say she couldn't shake the fear that she would be alone forever, there are not many fears like that. That's specific enough. That's why today we're going to talk about 3 cases of specific article use, right? Of specific nouns. There are 3 major kind of contexts which you need to know and practice this week. Okay, so first context is noun plus clause. Let me give you an example. So you say, I got an idea. So just based off that, I cannot really tell what specific idea you have. Because, you mean good idea? Is it bad? Is it about what? Right? So I still have a lot of questions. It's quite general. But even if I say I got a good idea, still about what? It can be any kind of a good idea, right? So, but you can boil it down. So what is a clause? It's kind of a little sentence inside a sentence. We already talked about that clause. We already talked about WH clause. Why do we use that clause plus noun or WH clause plus noun? To give more information about this noun. For example, I got the idea, and I will specify the idea using that clause. That hard work pays off. This specific idea. So, for example, again, if I say I got a good idea, it can be a good idea about the party, a good idea about the birthday present, any kind of a good idea. If I say I got the idea that hard work pays off, it's this specific one particular unique idea. I can use WH clause to specify it just as well. I got the idea why my project failed, right? I got the idea why my project failed. This specific idea, why specifically my project specifically then failed. It's very specific, right? So that's the first case. The second case is when, again, you have a noun, but instead of a clause, you use the preposition to give more information about this noun. For example, again, I say, I have a belief. And you're like, in whom? In what? Right? I can say I have a strong belief, but it's still not clear in who or what, right? Well, if I say I have the belief and then I specify in freedom and justice, in these specific things. Now it's quite particular, not in anything else, these two specific things. It can be, it doesn't have to be in. I can say I can have an idea of, and then specify this idea. I have an idea of what true love is, right? Or a specific idea of this problem you had. Again, it can be of, it can be about, it can be in, but we use this preposition, this little word, to give more information about the noun. So it's usually then quite specific. And finally, the third case, it's the contextual use of the. So again, I can say I need to know truth, like generally, any kind of truth, right? And you're like just generally or about something in particular. But if I say I need to know the truth, but before that I said, tell me who came here last night. I need to know the truth. So this truth is contextually specific. Because before that I mentioned like the truth about who came here last night. I could use let's say that clause. I need to know the truth or preposition phrase about a person who came here last night, right? Or can be contextual. But whatever case you're talking about, whatever tool you use in that class, preposition or contextual, it's always about specifying this one particular thing. When if it's not specific, you can ask extra question, like generally about what, about whom, right? If it's hard to specify it even further, then it's probably specific enough and you need to use the. Of course, here you have certain degree of freedom. And it's not that if you have that or of or in, it's automatically the. But it's a good indicator. Yet, let's talk about one more thing, just to throw in a pinch of salt. So for example, I can say, she couldn't shake a fear of spiders. You might say, Artem, why a fear? We just learned that here it's a very particular fear of particularly spiders. Well, maybe from the context it's clear that she had many fears, and it's just one of them. So when it's clear from the context that a person has a few things and it's just one of them, you can use a as well as the, right? Again, it's the more of a creative choice, but you should understand why you use a or the. So for example, she had a fear of spiders, but also of snakes, and she could shake a fear of snakes, but she couldn't shake a fear of spiders. Well, that's the case then. That is just one of many. Then you use a, even though you have of. Another example, she had a feeling that something was wrong, quite particular feeling something was wrong, but maybe from the context, or you just know that she had many feelings at this moment, and one of them is that something was wrong, and another that she was in danger, and the third one, something else, and all of those kind of mentioned in the context. So if it's one of many, you can use a if it's a countable noun. So even though, as I told you have a rule, but you have to be still quite creative, because the reason why I keep telling that articles is the hardest part of English grammar is because it takes a lot of feeling of the context, and really feeling what you need to say. It takes a lot of experience. That's why we start properly learning articles on the level of on the transition level between B1 and B2, because only now you guys have enough experience to even try using them correctly, right? So, but anyways, let's practice. What you need to do, you need to look at the sentence and the text and think of a good article. So here, people struggle with the question of how to manage anxiety. So very particular question, and it's not clear from context, it's just one of many, right? So let's see. Keep in mind that we use the with that on WH class, and then of, in, about prepositional phrases. You can also throw in the context. So, first things first, you will look at the slide, you will think of the articles you would insert, and then you will listen to my basically recap and see if you got it right. So make sure you stop the video to give yourself time to think, and only then you unpause it to listen to my explanations. So, many people experience and here have feeling of anxiety when they face stressful situations. Well, here's a good question, because what do we mean? A feeling like one of many feelings, right? Or the particular feeling. So I don't see in this context the other feeling, right? So it's quite particular feeling that we're going to talk about. So why wouldn't we use the? Many people experience the feeling of anxiety when they face stressful situations. It often starts with, I don't see, worry about future events. So I think it often starts with one thing, so there are other things, so it's one of many. So I would say, it often starts with a worry about future events. And again, uncertainty about what will happen next. But that's quite a particular uncertainty. It's not clear that we're going to talk about other uncertainty, so I would use the. It often starts with a worry about future events or the uncertainty about what will happen next. Scientists say that anxiety is linked to fear that something bad will happen even when there is no real danger. Again, a very particular fear, and it's not clear it's one of many. So scientists say that anxiety is linked to the fear that something bad will happen even when there is no real danger. So if you made mistakes, but mistakes for like, you chose instead of the because you thought it was one of many, or the other way around, it's not a big deal of a problem because it comes with experience. So first you get the theoretical ideas, then you do exercises, you do homework, and then you just speak and listen and write and you get feedback, and little by little you will get this experience, right? Because articles, I told you, it's really hard part of English grammar, not intuitive at all. So but it's not only about seeing it, it's also about hearing it. So let's put on headphones and let's try to hear the article and think why the native speaker used this or that article.
That something as minuscule as the flap of a butterfly's wings can cause something as gigantic as a tornado.
Something as minuscule as flap, butterfly's wings. So we know wings, flap, it's the movement, right, of this wings. So let's listen again, try to hear the article.
That something as minuscule as the flap of a butterfly's wings can cause something as gigantic as a tornado.
So as the flap of a butterfly's wing. So a butterfly, like any random butterfly wings, but particular flap. Again, we have not just any flap, but particularly of wings, particularly of a butterfly. Right, so quite specific. That's why she used the wings of a butterfly, right? The flap of a butterfly's wings. Sorry. Okay, next. Let's listen.
Agony. Somewhere else, noble and interesting and attractive people are living exactly the life that should be yours.
So these people are living life that should be yours. Let's listen again, but try
Agony.
to hear.
Somewhere else, noble and interesting and attractive people are living exactly the life that should be yours.
So exactly the life. Why the life? Because it should be yours. This not any kind of life they live, but this one that should be yours, exactly the one that should be yours. See, that's why the native speaker uses the here. Okay, so as always, first theory, then go and practice, make your mistakes, come to class, practice with me again, do writing, get my feedback, come, speak, try to use the articles. That's the only way. Theory, practice, writing, speaking. That's the best way for us to really solidify the knowledge. All right, so then hopefully you have no questions. If you do, make sure to get in touch with me, and I'll see you in my next video. Have a good one.